So let's start this meeting. I will start first with a preface. Um, Arales is a pan-decolonial network and grassroots organization based in Amsterdam, and we actively foster inter-organizational collaborations towards decolonization. Um, and for Aralez, it has been a very interesting and challenging year as we started with the Indigenous Liberation Series in times of COVID. And starting an organization in time with lockdown um, asked a lot of patience, creativity, and improvising. The resilience of the team made it possible to proceed with our vision towards a fundamental system change and a radical change of values. So, on behalf of the board members of RLS, we are very proud of our team and the great work they have done so far. Okay, so let's see who is behind the scenes and introduce our team. Um, in our team, the names are Chautileo, Chris, Pravini, Chihiro, and Max. Most of you already know them. Um, I will start with Chihiro. I will ask all of you who you are, what is your background, and why do you find it important to have started this initiative? Chihiro Geusebroek. You work on climate justice, especially at the wide environmental organizations. You create awareness about indigenous struggles. You criticize capitalism and system thinking. There's Chihiro.
More, yes.
And even more, yeah.
The only way I can summarize it in one sentence is to restore and restore relationship with Earth and each other. Yes, I'm happy to be here with you tonight. I think the question was around what makes this organization necessary for me. Was that the question that you wanted to?
Maybe more an introduction who you are and what do you do? Yeah. Who is Chihiro Geusebroek?
Okay. So yeah, I think you named a few elements of climate justice activism. I work as a trainer and as a story advisor, and I do writing and spoken word. And I also made an exposition last year. So working through different muscles. My background is in media studies, and so I'll always use communication to kind of detox from a lot of toxic logics and ways of being and ways of doing in order to have a wholesome struggle for anti-oppression.
Wow, thank you. We'll talk about more activities that you do later on in program. Thank you, Chihiro. Then we go to our next person. That's Pravini Baburam. Pravini.
Yes, good evening. Thank you,
Yeah.
Shalini.
Pravini, I know you work at the ECHO Expertise Center and Diversity Policy.
Yeah.
I know that your dad is Sadhu Hira. He created a platform, the Decolonial International Network. I want to hear more about that as well. And of course, about your documentary, The Uprising, and your toolkit. First, introduce yourself. Pravini.
Yes. Thank you. First of all, good evening, everyone. So good to have you here tonight. Indeed, my name is Pravini Baburam, and I'm an artist and activist. So I started out as a musician with my own band as a singer-songwriter. And that has evolved into filmmaking and now also writing. And for me, I try to use art as a means for social change. And indeed, I created the uprising, which included Shaima, who was also part of the film with her work on Palestine. And I'm also very much involved in the Hindustani community. So very involved in Indo-Caribbean resistance, which I find important to mention because I think in the social debate, the Hindustani community is considered conservative, but there's a really important progressive and decolonial sound within our community that I want to bring to the forefront also in the decolonial movement. From that perspective, I also co-founded Holy is Not a House Party, which is an organization that tries to challenge cultural appropriation of the Hindu Spring Festival Holi. And I was also involved in a campaign to bring the Hindustani warrior resistance Jani Tittori back to a collective memory. So in that sense, I really try to bring forth the decolonial perspectives from our community. And indeed, I also work at an NGO, ECHO. And in that context, I focus on diversity and inclusion in higher education and the labor market. So that also gives me a sense of what's going on in the diversity field and how that relates to decolonization, which we'll talk about more later on in this session. So that's it for now. And again, thank you so much. I'm really excited to see you all here tonight.
Thank you, Plavini. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we go to Chris. Chris de Pleuch. Yes. You
Thanks,
are
Charlene.
hello. You are an investigative journalist and an author, organizer, speaker, and you'll talk about, let me say, geopolitics and economic imperialism, neo-colonialism. Did I say it correct?
Neocolonialism, yeah. It's basically colonialism with neo before. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for introducing me, and thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, so basically I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm also an organizer. Before Arales, I worked a few years for Studio K, where I organized social justice events with really a lot of different groups, anti-racist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist events. And before that, I was also involved with the student movement, also against neoliberalization, but as well as anti-racism and decolonization. And most recently, I'm working with setting up a new foundation. Chautuleo is also working on that, which is called Masnawen, which aims to restore the ecosystem of Central Chile, or Wamapu, in cooperation with the indigenous communities and farmers there. But we're still setting that up. So so that's me in a nutshell, I think.
In a short version. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, then we go to Chautuleo. Chautuleo Kun, she is Mapuche Prevention herself, also work on the Indigenous Liberation Series and is creating awareness about indigenous human rights as well. Also creating more visibility about adoption and reclaiming your identity. So you work on mental well-being and spirituality. Chautuleo.
Thank you. I'm always find it hard to introduce myself. So I'm happy that you give some pieces away. My name is Chautuleo. I was born in Chile, Wamapu. Many countries knows many stolen indigenous children, and I was one of them. So I'm one of the stolen generations, and I see myself as a seed planted somewhere else and became somehow a flower. So, and in that sense, I try to create harmony and balance. And I've worked a lot in the peace buildings sector. My background is also political science, international relations, genocide studies, and conflict studies. So that was kind of my goal, to find my way in the peace building, but it's like a hard area to work. And then I try to find out how can I decolonize my adoption, because it's like a legal one. So I started to work with a lot of people who have the same background as Alejandra was saying, and trying to find my way, how to get reparation, how to get justice, how to get truth seeking. All kind of elements are basically in this decolonization concepts, and I'm feeling like I'm living the life of it. And I try to make sure that whatever I do, I don't act like a colonist. I try to make sure that wherever I'm coming, I try to keep my balance, keep my harmony, and keep sure that the one flower is there. And with more flowers, we can create a field of flowers, even in conflict areas. So
beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
me.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chatileo. Okay, then we will have Max van der Ploeg. He is our hardcore community builder, grassroots organizer, project leader, and a generally active in anti-racism movements, and also teach about colonial history and activism. And don't forget, he's also a musician. Max.
Yes, thank you, Charlene, for the introduction. And I love to hear everyone's introductions as well, because I recognize myself in everyone, in the sense that of what I've heard of everyone's introductions, everyone is putting in effort for something they find important, something that is unjust in the world. It'd be climate, adoption, refugees, I heard, doing things through theater, Palestine. And I think all these things are connected. They are connected through colonization, and that's what connects us all. Everyone came here for the word decolonization that brought us together here, and there's so many angles to look at it and what it causes harm. And I think that's why we should also unite and come together. And for me, actually, a good introduction is your introductions, because what I've been doing with my work is giving platform a lot. I did that at the student protest. It began in 2015, where a lot of voices need to be heard, organized there a lot of events, and then now in Pakhuis, before that in Studio K. So I've basically worked a lot with groups trying to facilitate voices that usually don't get to be heard. And yeah, I always ask, what would you do if you would have my means? And then try to open doors. That's what I do in an abstract sense. And that looks like a program maker now at Pakhuis, part-time, and in the other part, I'm also giving lectures now and workshops on the things that I've learned from people like you. So yeah, happy that you're all here, and
Nice.
hope we can learn together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Max. Thank you. You're a great example for a community builder, I have to say. And you're all interconnected. That's what I'm definitely saying. So let's go to the next part, and we will have a small panel discussion. I remind everybody, if you have questions, to put them in the chat. And at the part of the Q&A sessions, I will ask the questions to our team members. But first, let's go to the panel discussion between the team members about the importance of decolonization and the vision of Arales. Let's start with my first question, and it is, in your vision heading, you have chosen to add, don't diversify, decolonize. Why did you make that choice, and what's the energy behind this heading? Who wants to answer?
Yes, thank you, Charlene. I'll answer that. Diversity is really important, for decolonization as a process. But as we've seen in our practice, decolonization isn't always part of diversity. And what we mean by that is that in a lot of institutions, diversity is really one way to add to the existing norm. So the dominant voices remain dominant, and diversity means adding marginalized voices to the norm, but the status quo remains intact. And decolonization for us means challenging the status quo, challenging the norm, and challenging those dominant voices, dismantling the norm. So for us, that's really important to center that in the conversations. Second is, diversity often means is approached from a democratic approach. So if you want change, you need the majority to create change. But oftentimes in decolonization processes, it's the minority that is the fuel behind change, because the minority is the oppressed voice often. So for us, it's really important not to focus on a democratic issue, but on a moral issue. What's the right thing to do, even if it's not popular at that specific moment in time? And diversity is also often has a focus on emotion and on stories of people, rather than focusing on power structures and institutions. So making sure that we focus on challenging power, and looking for the disruption in that sense. Those are processes that aren't always part of diversity, because at the end of the day, in a lot of organizations, diversity is a business case. It's a way to remain the status quo. So we don't want to diversify, we want to decolonize, because we want to dismantle that system.
Powerful. That's powerful. Thank you, Pravini. Thank you. Okay.
Can I add to that?
Of course, of course.
It's like 100% everything Pravini said. And she has some amazing slides with that to also keep it super clear and comprehensive. A thing I want to add is from the American or the United States perspective, from a panel where diversity has been around longer as an administrative tool, as a legal tool. And the way I've learned about it is, I'm going to read here, that diversity amounts to a vague, conflict-averse, race-evasive, ahistorical celebration of difference. It is an administrative and legal tool to keep people from facing the fact that something happened. So it will put people in through the door, but on the condition for them to be silenced about the injustice. So it serves a purpose that keeps people innocent, illiterate, ignorant, and indifferent. And I find that quite, like, I feel that in my stomach. And I find it important to evoke.
Yeah. And could you give an example of where you can see that diversity is used just for, you can see it in the media right now, nowadays. It's not about decolonizing the system anymore. It's about putting diversity visible, and it's done. You cannot talk about it anymore. We have diversity, so now it's done. That's the thing that you mean, right?
Yeah, and maybe oh, sorry, go ahead, Max, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I can also give one example where I could see that diversity was overruling decolonization. Was when I was active at the student movement in the university. We really tried to actively engage with, hey, what are the ethical values of the university? Whose interest is it serving? For corporations, for instance, is this ethical? But these questions were put, let's say, downsized, because it became about individual experience and including people of color in the institution.
Yeah.
So we were not allowed to talk about explicitly decolonization in the diversity report, which became the diversity report, because that would challenge the way the institution functions. So, and we were at times also said, hey, but can you not emphasize the positive benefits to the institution, or bring it positive so everyone can feel, and then you make more change. But we want a fundamental change. So you're basically, the spectrum of the debate is surrounded about how can we get a seat at a table, but what if we question the table? How would that look like? And that's a whole different conversation that I think is not hold enough in the Netherlands, which I think our collective also felt that we need to actively then put this as an emphasis on our vision, because we see this often happening. And what I also did, I shared a link to our blog, where Pravini also has this clear table. What Chihiro said is you can watch back that lecture where she compares also diversity with decolonization. There's also links and critiques on diversity underneath in the blog. So that's also maybe a source for people to look at, to think about this more, what it means, the differences.
Great, there's much more to learn. Thank you very much. So don't diversify, but decolonize. Nice. Okay, so I'm going to my second question. And my second question is, why is solidarity with the Global South important for Arales?
Thanks, Charlene. I'll take that one. Okay. I think this goes also a bit links into the last question, because decolonization, if we're talking about decolonization, we're talking about changing structures in society that have been there for 500 years. So that means capitalist structures, but that also means imperialist structures. So the geographic element of colonialism was always very, very important, where colonized nations were basically extremely exploited, enslaved. We're talking about genocide, ecocide, and these structures never really stopped. If we look at, for example, a book published by the first independent president of Ghana, which is also the first decolonized nation in Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, he published a book on neocolonialism. He coined the term, and he basically says actually neocolonialism in many ways is worse than colonialism because it's so insidious and less explicit. And I can't really do justice now to the whole topic of neocolonialism, but just to give a little bit of a gist, or I just collected some basic facts. So, for example, if we're talking about poverty, the World Bank uses this ridiculous poverty line of $1.9 a day, which is, you know, by that figure, there are more people undernourished than there are in poverty, which is ridiculous. Like you don't have enough food to eat, but you're not poor, supposedly. So if we take like the really basic, just for basic nutrition, most experts say it's like $7.50 a day you need, which is still like way below any Western poverty line. But by that figure, like the majority of the people in the globe are still in poverty. And in the Netherlands, it's like 0.5%. So it really goes to show, like, if we're talking about justice, if we're talking about inequality, if we're talking about oppression, and we're just looking at our own borders, we're really missing the point. And this is not about some white savior complex saving the people there. No, it's about stopping the actual oppression by the West of colonized nations. There's a recent book, it's called The Wealth of Some Nations. And it calculated that about $5 trillion every year goes from colonized nations to the global north, to the West, which is more than 30 times, like 35 times the entire budget that the West spends on so-called development aid. So, you know, it just goes to show there's really still this drain going on. And imperialism is still a major issue. And if we ignore that, we're not really decolonizing. We're ignoring a huge part of the colonial system, which is a global system. So, yeah.
Imperialism, yeah. That's a lot of awareness. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. So how do you reflect on the left and the anti-racism movements in the Netherlands in terms of how they position themselves in the global struggle for decolonization and being positioned in the global north?
Chihiro, do you want to go first on this one, or should I? Yeah. So how do I reflect on the left? And I think this reflection also goes to why we exist, or that at least I felt personally that we need to exist, is that I see that this connection is not happening enough, because I see there's quite a Eurocentric view also within the anti-racist movement in the left within the Netherlands. To give you an example, let's say George Floyd happened and everyone gets on the street about Black Lives Matter. And that's legitimate completely, and we should do that. But the thing is, if we look at the Americana Massacre, for instance, where 35 mine workers a few years ago were massacred for white capital, like an English-British company was there in South Africa still, 80% of the land there still owned by white settler offspring. And they were protesting for better wage labor. And then there were 30 mine workers were shot. Black people were shot, mine workers who were working for white capital, exploited workers. And this is then not seen as in relation to something that is connected to what we're living off here. So there you see, and that's also police violence that is connected to capitalism, how it's formed. So you don't see this link made to racism and movement work that is making the connection with capitalism. And it's this thing that I notice. It's always focused on within the Netherlands. If you look at who gets visibility, it's often the people with and I include myself in that group as well. I mean, I might look like a person of color to a white person, but within the spectrum of privileges, I embody a higher education. I have mixed background. I'm born here. I speak the language well. So there's a whole other group within the anti-racism, let's say, field that I see have less visibility or voice that would also bring with them from their background stories or perspectives that would want to critique the system because they are here, because this system is over there. And I see this link is not made often enough, this connection. And I would finish my, let's say, contribution also by what I found a very inspiring quote by Malcolm X, who was talking about when he was in the civil rights movement. He talked about a distinction between civil rights and human rights. And he said we should move away from civil rights, because then we're only fighting for our rights as Black people within the US border system. But if we talk about human rights, then we also include the people of the African continent, etc., because our way of life is going to destroy their way of life. So we cannot have an anti-racist movement that's based on civil rights, because civil rights are colonial. So this kind of narrative, I really still miss in the anti-racist movement in the Netherlands. Which is how, and I'm not someone who's going to tell others because everyone is busy, everyone does from their heart. I also believe it. But so then I'm like, okay, then if I have this critique, then we should start ourselves building that narrative up. And I'm sure a lot of them will be willing to stand next to what we're doing our work as well. But that's something I would like to focus on with what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we can learn much more about capitalism and racism and the connection, and because we all are connected worldwide.
I can add to it 100% on what Max just shared, and I think what I want to say is actually connected between what Chris just shared and Max just shared. Because I think when it comes to expanding our anti-racism and decolonial practices, it actually comes from this idea that colonialism rules through divide and conquer, so that we if we are not rooted in international solidarity, we stay within the constructs of all these binaries and boxes and borders, and those are colonial borders, colonial constructs. So many countries have just been a figment of colonial imagination, where other people are still dealing with the effects of that. So the first I would want to say is the border is an herida abierta, an open wound. It is a wound between people and it still bleeds. It's by Gloria Anzaldúa. And I think from this, we have an imperative to strengthen our anti-racism and decolonial struggle internationally. Because what we see also with the Black Lives Matter protest is that when there is a Black Lives Matter protest for undocumented people, it is shocking how few people were at the museum Plein, because their lives have been so devalued, not just over the axis of color, but other markers of undesirability within this colonial structure of division. And so when we work beyond all those borders, we actually strengthen our humanity and go beyond civil rights, go beyond even human rights, I would say, and talk about the dignity of life, which also includes a lot of our environmental struggles and the way that environmental racism shows up. And so, yeah, I think there are all these layers, and it's not to say that the people who are working so hard and so tirelessly in the anti-racism movement are bad in any way, but more like we need a bigger container for a stronger movement that actually can deal with the ways that hegemony and the system works to appropriate and kind of steal our movement for its own purpose of dividing and conquering again.
Nice, strong. Thank you, Chihiro. Thank you. Talking about human rights and civil rights, let's talk about spiritual rights as well. So which role does healing or spirituality play for you? So what makes spirituality important, and what does holistic liberation mean?
Well, I can do a contribution to that. Spirituality to me is just a way of living. It's just like how I organize my life, how I organize my ideas, my thoughts, how I act towards people or towards humans, towards like animals, how I just be. And it's part of this cosmovision I believe in. And the belief is something that goes beyond me. Like it's most of the time I sense that spirituality is not, it's a concept that is very difficult maybe for some people in the Western society to understand it. Like, for example, a concrete example is like, how do we view children? How are the children actually yours? Is it your child? Can you possess a child? Can you claim a child? From my point of view, no, never. You can't do that because a child is part of this universe, and this universe is so much bigger than we can imagine. And the imagination is also like something that is related to what you believe. So you have many principles, ancestral principles, for example, that comes from way back. That is really like something that is being given from generation to generation. And we sometimes believe that it's not there. But I think when you do find ways to get to the spiritual level, you can find like the messages, and you need to be open to that. World, especially in the world of activism, I see a lot of people shouting and they are angry and they try to create this like destructive force to damage the colonial system, which is totally fine with me because we need to get the change. We need to make sure that we no longer have like this destructive force in our lives. But it's more like how what is your guidance to this? And I think that when you really want to have to change, you need to unlearn the global mindset of destruction, not only in your mind but also in how you act. So the unlearning of the global mindset starts with your values, with your principles, and with your beliefs. And that is like your starting point. And then you go, okay, to make sure that you stick to that. You make sure that wherever you come, you are guided by the principles, for example, of balance and harmony. So you do need to create a change. You do need to make sure that nobody's getting hurt by the injustice and nobody's getting hurt by, for example, racism. Because I also saw like many questions, for example, by Darko, like what is decolonization and how is it not a buzzword? To be honest, I think when we want to decolonize, we need to create this holistic perspective, meaning that you need to be a little bit more aware of that spirituality is part of decolonization. And also healing, because a lot of time when you are too angry, you can't heal and you're still hurting other people by your behavior. You're still doing that. So and take a look at yourself is always a way for me to make sure that I keep my balance. It's still also hard because you do have your daily struggles, you do have your daily things. But healing is not only like a responsibility for yourself as an individual. I think that a lot of people think, and we are like conditioned by that it's like an individual like path. But if you really want to heal, you need to do it in a collective way. So you need to make sure that the healing process is by doing like making sure that if someone is behind you, you go back and you take that person by the hand and you walk together, and you're not making sure you make sure that nobody's leaving behind. So this healing process is really part of this decolonization. And if we forget the moments of healing and we forget the moments of being spiritual, then we lose the focus, and we only go by shouting decolonize. But how? And what is really the purpose of that? To me, it's really like I want to make sure that if I'm going to make a change, I really do it differently. I make sure that my way of living and my way of like dealing with things is not by the hatred approach. It's not by the things that the way of how people always destroy the beautiful things of this world. They always do it in a hard way. So let us focus on how we get this spirituality voice and this like healing perspective into one, and make sure that we are trying to find ways of embedding this in our way of life, trying to unlearn the hard way and trying to make sure that we get a more softer way, because the world is shit, full of people, full of fools, and with spirituality maybe we get something different.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chatuleo. Thank you. Yes, we need a different energy to create changes, and we should start with ourselves. Definitely, definitely. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for the panel. We don't have much time because we are behind time, so I'm going further with the Q&A. Some questions. Let's see if I got some questions in the chat. You already answered the questions of Darko, right, Chatuleo? In some fields, it seems as if decolonization is becoming a buzzword. Does Arales notice this as well? And how do you deal with this? Does anyone of the team wants to react on that one?
Oh, you want to go first, Chiro?
Sure. So I can't speak of how we as Arales as a whole have dealt with it on all occasions, because we've just started for a year and done a couple of projects also, led by different people. But I think in general, yes, we recognize that this is a buzzword, just like diversity. Then the next buzz is decolonization, especially in universities or and such. It's really up to us to deepen its practice and its understanding. It's not going to happen in and of itself. But just like I personally have used the diversity door to talk about decolonization, I will use the decolonization shallow door to deepen that and create deeper relationality and an understanding of historical oppressions that are oozing into the present. And so the task stays the same, because we always need to refine that what has been made shallow or erased at all. So from my point of view, still the shallow offers more a jumping off point than the erased, because before, if I would propose a film that would be about anything that has to do with indigenous resurgence, it would just be, well, we're a Dutch fund or we're a Dutch organization, and that's not Dutch enough. Whereas now the conversation is like, oh, we have to interface with that, and now let's see what is the link. So that's a better starting off point for me personally. I'm curious how others relate to that.
Yeah, if I can add to Shiro, I echo what Shiro says. And I also want to mention that for me, I consider it as a sign of progress that decolonization is now part of the mainstream debate. So I think it's up to us indeed to use that as a momentum to indeed deepen that understanding. And I think, it's progress that we're now able to actually use that term rather than diversity, what we used to use, and knowing the limits of that. So I think it's important to think in terms of progress, for us also to identify what are those milestones of progress. And one of the milestones is that we actually get to talk about decolonization. So, and I think that's also part of the work that we want to do is what are we fighting for? If we talk about anti-racism, you talk about what you're fighting against. And part of this collective is to really talk about what are we fighting for, and that's all the things that we discussed today. In that sense, I think we still have a lot of work to do, because we're still figuring out what are we fighting for, because we're still part of this colonial pie, trying to deconstruct it and dismantle it, and we have to figure out what that looks like in the present day and for the future.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Pravini. Okay, we have another question of Amal. I'm going to read it. Hi, I have recently joined the Diaspora Policy Institute. We work mostly in Germany and with diverse African organizations. I noticed that big organizations play divide and rule by commissioning or not commissioning various trainers from the Black, Jewish, Sinti, and Roma queer communities. I feel it's important to counter this dynamic by combining our voices and to offer programs in collectivity on our own terms. So away from one of workshops and decolonizations as a side track add-on, but the facilitation of changing colonial structures. Interested to hear your experience and this on this, and if and in what way we can collaborate, the joint international conference, etc. Amal.
I think this is a very good and fundamental and very important question that you pose, Amal. And this is something that I've noticed as well when I zoom back to my university period with activism there, is that you see who gets certain positions or access to streams of money have to walk a certain talk or talk a certain walk. Yeah, they promote a certain narrative. So in that sense, I noticed that a lot of groups were then at some point getting competitive with each other over, let's say, a scarcity of resources instead of seeing a joint struggle. Even within a group, you could see this, but also between groups, you could see this. And yeah, groups fighting on each other for visibility and recognition. And I think that's there where there's need for, because as Arales, this is also some conversations that we have and we don't have an answer. It's not it's difficult because on the other hand, you want to have resources, let's say, to be able to do your activities, but you also want to keep your autonomy. And that's like a balance that you need to keep all the time. And yeah, I forgot my train of thought, but I just want to say this is a very important note, and I've noticed it, and it's not something that I know how to fix directly, but maybe team members have ideas about it. Just want to say, well, I recognize what you said.
I also recognize like how the powerful institutions directly or indirectly like divide society or like small organizations. And I used to be a fundraiser for like the bigger institutions. So it's always like this way of presenting yourself. But I see it also in how, for example, with a world of adoption, there is this budget for reparations. So the Dutch government told us, like, okay, for example, you get 1.2 million euros, and this is like for 40,000 adoptees. So I figured out who gets what. So this is where it starts, exactly where it starts, because then you get this kind of structure, the destructive like division. And I, just like Max saying, I don't have the answer, but the recognition of this kind of dynamics is step one. We do need to recognize it, and we do need to acknowledge it, because the acknowledgement in itself is already decolonization, because we do see it. And it's not about giving now the solution, but let's start with the first steps and make sure that we say, yes, we see and we recognize it.
I may be curious, except if other team members want to react as well. Maybe Amal, do you have an idea about... because it's a difficult problem, but maybe you have encountered once that people have overcome this division.
We had a first meeting with the Sinti and Roma organization, Sinti and Roma Council, and the Jewish Museum to look in where we want to get more organizations and people involved. To form an alliance and offer our programs collectively, because there is the feeling that if we dictate what it is we feel is necessary, and that's the best thing on the market because it comes as a joint action, then in some way it's also a way of taking away that power of, I'm you know, exaggerating, but you know, it feels still like we're somebody's slave, needing to perform to terms that we don't dictate. And I feel it's necessary to take that power back, and we can do that by effectively collaborating. I have to say that I'm very pleased that Diaspora Policy Institute has started that within the Black community, and now they've asked me to come and diversify that even more. And yeah, my work is about making these bridges. Also, and I know there was a thing about intersectionality, but my grandmother is Anna Israel on my mother's side, and on my father's side is I'm nomadic from a nomadic Sudanese tribe, and I'm you know, my father was Muslim, so a lot of those things there, they come to one even in people like me. Yet when you look at how that is being facilitated, it's as if these things have nothing to do with each other, and as if they don't impact each on its own. So yeah, I feel quite strongly that that is a good way to come to a greater degree of unity, and to make sure that you know, much more people understand what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Amal. And it's also maybe a bridge to your next question, because you have a really interesting background. Amal's next question. Do you want to ask it yourself, Amal?
Wait, I have to see what I just wrote.
I have a second question, and that is one around ensuring each other's safety and well-being. The frontliners of us are being more and more targeted by extreme groups and individuals. I have gone through hell in the Netherlands, seeing a lot of good work actively destroyed by the powers to be. I left in protection of my family and being a traveler in the last year. I realize how many of us are displaced, not due to choice, but as a measure of to survive. Amal.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Max, do you want? And then me later after you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we wanted to do also as Arales, and that's not it's not enough, of course, to make a right for this, but we do want to make space for people to come together, yeah, to how you say, recharge. So for instance, we want to develop, but we can't do it due to the corona, and Zoom is not how you say, the right platform for this, but we have already developed it, but we were waiting till it's allowed. Created a landing space where people from our networks can come together, have a collective meditation and a sound journey through music, and also a sharing circle where you just share what's happening, because yeah, some things you don't control, as in what the outside, how they respond to what you do, but how it affects you, you can control to a certain extent, and the way you can build more resilience if you have a community to which you can share this pain, who can recognize this pain, who have maybe gone through a similar thing, and can then afterwards speak to you and give you back your strength or advice through previous experience. So the resilience also comes from a community. So I think one of the things we once a month, it's going to be, we will have landing space sessions where we just come together not to produce something. We're often coming together to produce something, right? It's a gathering, we learn, we take something, but just to get back, to land back to ourselves, to share something, so we can revitalize and take care of ourselves, because that's half of the work. Otherwise, if we are have traumatized or hurt in the field, we're going to hurt then our allies. That's going to then create maybe another division, because it was, you know, these kind of things happen. So I think creating spaces where we take care of each other, so of our own resilience, is one of the possible answers, and another, of course, being able to prevent it, but that's something we can do, and we hope to do once the corona also allows people to come together in smaller groups, and this will also be for smaller groups. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice answer. And during, we have created also the Indigenous Liberation, where we have some ceremonies. And one of the rules is when we are at the ceremony, we lose our activism and we put it in the store, because then we are just open for the ceremony and we are open for the intentions we want to create together. Let me tell you one short story. It only takes 1 minute. But it helps me because I understand the pain, what is written like behind, I see your pain in a way. There was this boy and he was 8 years old and he was taken by the colonists, by the Spaniards. And his father was being murdered and he was taken by the biggest general. So that guy really saw this boy and he really wanted to have him as his son. So he was raised him with lots of love. He was raised him pretty well. And the boy get to know the Spanish like way of living. So he was able to take care of the horses. He was able to, to walk in the room where the Spaniards were deliberating the strategies, how to attack the indigenous communities. So he was really listening. So he was taken and put somewhere else outside his community, and it wasn't his choice. So he was trying to survive. Once he got older, at a rainy night, he thought, okay, this is the moment I need to leave. And he left. And but he left with a lot of like good lessons, because he knew the Spanish strategy. He knew how they were attacking, and he knew their gaps and their weaknesses. So when he got back to his community, he became the biggest the biggest enemy of the Spanish people. And the Mapuche people were never colonized or by the Spaniards because of his hardship, his like survival. So when I'm thinking about myself, or when for example, my son is getting all these like feelings about feeling displaced or feeling his need to survive, then I try to find ways in, I find my strengths in this kind of stories, because in a way we are here and we need to survive. So that's a fact. I can't change that. But how can we make sure that we still get this resilience, and how can we make sure that we have this ancestral storytelling that gets us up every day, and when we wake up we know we have this purpose. So it's just like a short story about getting resilience by taking us to our ancestral heroes. That was my short contribution.
Thank you, Chatuleo. It was a bit more than 1 minute, but it's okay. We need more collaboration. We need to take more care of each other. We are short in time. I see other questions from Mace and from Katerina. I will get back to that at the end. I will go further with the program, and that's taking a review on the past activities and see what more we could expect from Arales. And therefore I would start with Chihiro. Yeah, Chihiro. She's still there?
I'm here. I'm waiting for the question.
Okay. I didn't see you. Okay, sorry. Can you tell us about the Shell Must Fall exposition? How does this project relate to the vision of Arales?
Sure, yeah. So I think, in this part, we just want to give a small recap of a few things we've already done, and then how the decolonial series is, going to unfold, because this first session is a bit different than the other sessions. But for the expo, it was something I was able to do last year. And it focused on 100 years resistance against colonial Dutch Shell, the biggest corporation of the Netherlands, and where Shell has been a lot in the news, even by mainstream media. They will write something about it needing to clean up, or something that they are in some way contributing to climate change. But there is this false narrative of that is something that is popping up now that we need to do now, as if it hasn't had a long, long history of contestation, and that hasn't been led by colonized people, by people who are fighting back because of exploitation and appropriation of their lands and lives and health and livelihoods. So with this expo, we had 20 pieces, installations, walls that went through that long history of protest in many shades, in many forms, starting in Indonesia, and looking at how the house has been on fire for more than 100 years in certain places where shell first landed, and where it, you know, has its power from, where it stole the resources through colonial rules that were very much blurred with colonial politics of the Dutch government. And so it puts the whole different questions in different context around the question of what to do with shell.
Yeah.
And that it's not just about a court case that they need to clean up, which is of course very important, and they do need to clean up, but that it's a deeper analysis, that they actually there needs to be restorative justice for all these communities, for all these landscapes.
Definitely.
And that's what the expo did. It was infused by the NDSM in Amsterdam in collaboration with Milieu Defensie. Me and my partner Anna Bisila organized it. So.
Wow, great. Can we see, if we want to find, if you can we see any, can we read somewhere more about the show?
Definitely. There's different podcasts that we did around the expo. And for Greenpeace, there was an article. It's on my website in the blog. Okay. And also on the Arales website, there's some links to some side events that we did in Bak with different speakers, also building coalition, because around everything that we do, it's better when we do it with more partners.
Yeah.
So that was very important also to have voices from Nigeria and voices from Curacao, and build that relationality into it.
Nice collaborations. Thank you, Shihiro. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Then we go to Chris. Chris, what can you tell us about the art of resistance?
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. The Arts of Resistance is a long-term project which I've been setting up in collaboration with Afro Groups and Afrospective. So we're doing this together. And basically, as the name already indicates, it's about arts and it's about resistance. Because one of the things we noticed is that I think everybody who has been an activist for a long time can kind of feel the drain. And, you know, at first you're very inspired, maybe you're even enraged, or, you know, you're very moved, but you can get grinded down eventually. And we need this kind of new strength, new inspiration. We need community. And music is such an effective, and art more generally as well, such an effective tool to bring that about. So I think it's really important for our communities to bring these two together and to create spaces where that's possible. But it also works the other way around, because it's also a very effective tool in making our community bigger, making our movement bigger, which we do need to win, because we do want to win eventually. So, you know, it's eventually also want to really create a different voice, at least within the Amsterdam scene. Who knows, eventually it might be bigger than that, but a different voice in the cultural scene.
What can we expect in the coming period from?
Yeah, so what we've already done is a festival in December, which was a combination of a panel discussion, live music, poetry, spoken word, and we'll do a similar festival again towards the end of summer. Hopefully it will look a bit different then, because in December it was of course mostly live stream. And the theme for the one in summer will be solidarity with colonized nations, with the global south. And Chihiro will be there. Profini might be there. We're not sure yet. But we'll have different programs as well. Workshops, training beginning artists in writing more revolutionary songs, writing songs for movements, organizing, things like that. So we're excited to do that, and we'll have some community sessions to, really build this kind of revolutionary art community. So it's a long-term project. We have a lot of things. There will be some live casts as well. So a lot of things coming. So just check the website. It should be coming online quite soon, actually. This should have been happening already like a year ago, but Corona happened, so
everything is postponed.
yeah. But that's the basics. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Looking forward to the festival. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Then I go on to Pravini. Pravini, you have produced a toolkit that is called Decolonize the Mind. Maybe you can tell us more about that, and how was it received, and how can people use it, and what can we expect, of course?
Yeah, so the toolkit is based on the film The Uprising. I made The Uprising with the intention to offer an educational resource for people in the movement who want to take on an educational or facilitator role. Because what I noticed is that people are really looking for activities or resources to engage people in decolonization and decolonizing the mind. So the toolkit is based on the film, where you can use the segments of the film and relate it to either a theoretical exercise or a practical exercise or a little bit of both. And to translate basically the theory to the context of whoever you're working with. So it offers actual activities, from writing a letter to your ancestors or creating visuals that reflect or criticize colonial legacies in the space that you're in. And it's offered for free. It's for free, a free download on my website.
Nice.
The film The Uprising is also available for free on YouTube. So I really want to make the information accessible to people who want to use it. And it's actually now both the film and the toolkit are being used in educational institutions. So in that sense, educators
Great.
feel that it's really useful for them. Yeah.
That's great. And if you haven't seen the movie of documentary of Pravini, The Uprising, it's a must-see documentary. So you can find it on the website of Arales, right? Included with the toolkit. So
yes, it's findable there.
Okay. Thank you, Pravini. Last question to Charles, Leo, and Max. Maybe you can tell us more about the Indigenous Liberation Series, the ceremonies and the manifestations.
Who starts?
I'm gonna point to you.
We started this sequence because we wanted to, of course, when you think about decolonization, you think about Columbus, you think about what happened in 1492 when he entered Arales. So it was interesting to see, like, there are so many diaspora indigenous here in the Netherlands. You have no idea. You have no idea how many knowledge, how many like wisdom, how many people are walking here in Amsterdam, complete, like, displaced in a way, but also very much rooted in the Netherlands. So it was so interesting to see, okay, how can we unite and how can we build this community? Because we do have something in common that is like our ancestral way of living, but also our future dreams. And one of the dreams we had was, okay, we do need to decolonize. We do need to make sure that that is what we want to achieve, but also we want to achieve healing, and we want to achieve like spirituality and working to integrate more the cosmic vision. So I think the process is something that Max can explain about, like, how did we do that and how was the community being built. But one of the things that we do want to achieve, for example, for this year, is to create a manifestation. We really want to make sure that we tackle this Columbus Day, because it's still being celebrated in Latin America as a way of, okay, this was the day we celebrate it, because that dude has entered our continent. But we forget totally the consequences of him being entered in Latin America, the murder, the rape people. Like there were so many genocide practices. I don't even know all those kinds of bad things happened afterwards. So there are so many things we need to discuss and we need to deliberate, and there are so many people here available. So the only thing we need to do is get them together and make sure that we create this spark, and it's being handed over. Okay, Max, now the process.
I think also due to the time, I'm just gonna, I want to keep it really short. About the process, it's actually also on our website. You can read it and watch also the back, and just feel free to email if you want, if you're curious about it. I just, I'd rather say something, a last thing, than maybe about the indigenous liberation, because I don't have an indigenous background in that sense. But one of my motivations to also join together with this diaspora and with Chautuleo and others in our group to set this up is because I think, a lot of times when we talk about colonization and decolonization, we are talking about the hurt or the catastrophes. And what I find beautiful is that, at least for me, and humbling, is that there's alternative ways, there's alternative values, ethics, ways of relating to each other, to life on earth, etc. And we can learn so much. So this needs to be heard. If we're gonna get towards a system, we're really good at critiquing often, but we need to learn to listen and be a bit humble and see if we can change and learn something. So that was also one of my motivations, at least, to put this, and I hope we'll be able to contribute to that. And I think we just have to finish with saying something about the learning sessions, because I also want to respect
learning sessions.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe you can take it over from there.
Yeah, I'll just say something short about that, what people can also expect, because I know Zoom is also more draining than real life conversations. And you know, if we wouldn't have the corona, I would have loved to make dinner for you all together with our team or with volunteers, because for me, community building, doing these things together is really part of it. And I find it sometimes difficult to keep the energy up also in this online space. So I say, I hope you're forgiving, and we are learning for that. And once we can, I would love to make dinner together and everything. But about the learning sessions, I think we have touched a lot today. Like, Chihiro added something, then Chautuleo, Profini, Chris, you, Amal. And there are a lot of concepts that need more deepening. And I've organized a lot of events over the years, but there's a panels and you have a lot at once. So this is more like recorded in Zoom in-depth sessions with a lecture or an in-depth Q&A, and then interactive session with one person where you can really delve more deeply into something, and it will be recorded. There will be listening and watching tips, and that will be posted on our blog. So every 2 weeks, there's a session on a different topic. So one can be on the university, there's one, or anti-racism on the work floor, another about climate justice. You can just see what fits you, and hope you also share it with those who are maybe interested in that topic, but to really create a space where there's more in-depth learning, because I think that is missing. Free, accessible, available information and in-depth knowledge. So I hope we can contribute with these learning sessions to that.
Okay.
And in our mailing list, people can follow it and keep updates, and on our Facebook page.
And Max, can participants send ideas or suggestions for the decolonial learning sessions?
For sure, for sure. And I like the first ones we'll do as our members, our teams ourselves. We're gonna do the first few sessions. They are in a line now. Also to just see how it goes technically, so we are prepared when we ask others as well, because we're learning by doing as well. But from after the summer onwards, we will have also, of course, open for suggestions. So do feel free to suggest also if you think something fits our perspective, someone that should be heard, then yeah, please contact us. And what is exciting about Corona, or a plus point, is that with the online space, we can also have international voices. So also the blog will be a mix between Dutch sessions and English sessions, depending on if it's an international speaker or a local speaker. So it will be mixed languages. We'll put there as well which language it is. But yeah, we can also have voices from other parts of the world from which we can learn also because of this online space. So that's I think then an added value of that we're doing this.
Okay, thank you, Max. Thank you very much. We will look forward to the decolonial learning sessions bi-weekly, right? Every 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're already out of time. It's 4 minutes past. So we still had 2 questions. What we're going to do with the 2 questions? Are we going...
I'm fine with answering, then I'm staying, but also wanting to give people the chance to be able to leave if they're tired or have kids around. Yeah, I saw some people at Ramadan that are getting hungry. So there's lots of reasons. So don't feel offended if you leave. I think, except if we don't have practical points from our side, so feel free to leave. But then we can stay. I'm happy to stay.
Okay.
I actually do have to leave. I'm so sorry. But I do want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to engaging in more conversations in the future. Also to Charlene for hosting tonight, and to my team members. We did it! So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Is there anybody else of the team members that have to leave? No, everybody could stay. Okay, let's go to the questions first. We had a question of Mees de Lind van Wijngaarden. Connected to the present topic, do you think it's necessary to heal collective trauma? And in what way could we give form to that? And who should be involved? Collective trauma.
Yes. And there's so many levels and so many ways and so many processes. I think for us, we've been having more and more conversations about reparative justice, and how when we are advocating justice, we shouldn't just look at punitive and distributive justice. Those are really anchored in institutions where our agencies are often deferred, and we miss out on healing, whereas restorative and generative justice together can build a path of reparative justice. And so this is definitely something that we're interested in, both as a practice to address our collective wounds, as well as analyzing, learning from other people who've already had such processes, and what goes right and what still is an open wound, and what can we advance. So there's a lot of interest there. I think one thing that for me, as a person who is from Indigenous descent but grown here in the Netherlands with a very Dutch family, I've really learned a lot from collective trauma healing through artists in Canada, like Bonita Lawrence, who wrote a book about real Indians and the others, and the way that we still, get erased in our own societies. So there are certain books, but depending on which trauma you are dealing with, the collective trauma, there will be different doors. I think the landing space is definitely a place where you can even start to listen to your own body, like what is coming up in the traumas that are alive in your body. Because the body is so wise and it has so many ways of informing. And in the beginning, you may not hear her or your body. And the more you listen, the more the body whispers to you. So I do think that these kind of moments that we're building, build in a habit of listening into our wounds as well, to do collective healing, starting with examining like what's alive for you that needs addressing in order not to reproduce wounds that are have been done to you. So that would be my grain of salt, grain of sand in the.
I have also maybe one thing to add, because there was also like, how can we give form to that? For example, when you are adopted, you can see it from different angles. My family weren't seeing my adoption as, okay, she is adopted. No, I was missing. So there is this nice collective trauma like initiative of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And it's like even a hashtag, and many people are joining now because it's a big problem. Many Indigenous women are facing real danger throughout like Latin America or the Americas. So this symbol has been created. It's like a red hand on your face. And it symbolizes not only the trauma, but also like you should shut up about these issues. So for me, it was really like, wow, there are so many people with similar stories. I was missing, but I was being shut because I was adopted. So when you have this symbol, and when you see this symbol at murals, you see the symbol, people actually like marathon runners are actually having this symbol while doing marathon. So it's really about getting this open in the air and getting this collective trauma being visualized in art, in culture, and make sure that anyone can see it and anyone can recognize this symbol of murdered Indigenous women. So to me, it was really like one of the most beautiful moments in my life that I have seen this symbol, but also like one of the moments that I thought, well, so many people are hurt, so many families, so many people are still missing, and we don't know anything about it. The police is doing nothing. The injustice towards Indigenous women, we don't even go there. We have like a lot of things to do. But if we have this hand in the open, we say no more, no more. And that is really like one of the things that I enjoy, like art and like this kind of collective trauma being visualized.
Maybe one thing I'd like to add is that, you know, to some extent, all trauma is collective trauma. Like there's no trauma that is entirely individual. You're never alone, whatever you're going through. And I think because all trauma is collective, working through it and doing it in a collective way is also has such huge potential for transformation and turning it into movements. And one thing I was thinking about listening to your answers was reparation masterclass I did a few years back with Esther Stanford Kose, who's a reparationist, Pan-Africanist. And she's done a lot of work around that. And what I found very beautiful was that for her, like one of the most important parts of her reparations framework was the principle of non-repetition. So that what happened can never happen again. So she wasn't just, you know, it wasn't like some financial thing of give me some money for, you know, this or that. It's really about changing the world. That's what collective trauma is about. That's what collective healing is about. So that was my my little stone in the pond.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. Okay, we're going on to the last questions, and it's from Caterina Alvarez. How do you take intersectionality into account in your work? How multiple oppressions intersect, and at the end, we can't tell apart which oppression affects what. For example, how men and women often experience racism differently, just as how women of different races can experience sexism differently. What are your perspective on intersectionality in your work?
Go for it, Max.
Yeah.
I was also waiting for Max.
Oh, please fill in as well. But I think if you look at intersectionality, it is such an important concept, as in if you look about who we're talking about, if if we want to talk about decolonization and you talk about only race, let's say, then you take away half of the experience of the group that has been colonized, plus the LGBT community. So you're talking about more than half of the people colonized, as in for who this concept can be useful. So I think it's a lens that can help us understand the complexity in differences. But it's also a lens that I think sometimes it's very how you say, selectively used also in terms of diversity. So people use like intersectionality as also, like the word decolonization, been hyped a lot, where I basically some of the dimensions within intersectionality are seen less. So for instance, I would say like class or migration background or geographic, where you are located in the world. These are things that are sometimes missed a lot, which I think refer then again to making invisible current colonial structures. So I think, intersectionality helps us as a lens to see these things merging. But at the same time, it's one of the many lenses that can help us. And I think, you have a spiritual lens that you can approach things with, and an intersectional lens that you can approach things with. So it's more, I think, one of the things we need to have in our pockets, let's say, of different lenses we can use to do the work right and fitting for different peoples. And also, I think when building community, it's also important to recognize different experiences, in the sense, I mean, we've talked about traumas, so there's also different traumas. And if you don't have an intersectional lens, you might not notice that there can be a need for certain groups to separate or be amongst people who have similar experiences. So I think this lens can also help noticing what are different needs within groups. So I would say it's an enriching concept. I don't know if that was a soothing answer, but
I can add something. As intersectionality came into my life in my activism, I was super happy with it as an intervention in a legal system, a governance, in a culture that is always pretending to be more of a universal way, or a monoculture way, or a purity way, and doesn't really understand the different overlap or the different distinctions. So it's a very helpful tool to make interventions like Kimberly Crenshaw initially did. And recently I came across the work, recently I was listening to Sandy Grande. She's an amazing writer, scholar, teacher, Indigenous Quechua living in the US. And she wrote a book, Red Pedagogy, where she analyzes different critical thought, anarchism, feminism, like different ways that have been accepted by academia, and how that intersects with Indigenous studies or Indigenous thought. And intersectionality came up, and she said, it's a very helpful tool for a colonized world to gain sensitivity. But for my own indigenous cosmology, we are already context-based. We are already whole. We already have room for the different layers. So it's not something that comes authentically to my cosmology, but living in this colonized governance and culture and legal system, it is a very helpful means for movement to make the needed interventions. And I thought that was a very helpful enrichment for me as well, in where I am in my activism. And I can really recommend the book from Sandy Grande, Red Pedagogy, and talks on YouTube. You can also find about decolonizing education from this her indigenous perspective.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Chihiro. Max.
I had one small thing to add that I forgot to tell as well. What I think with thinking in boxes, like, okay, we can analyze racism, then we analyze gender, then we analyze queer hatred, etc. If you take them separately, I don't also think you can understand the system well enough and how the oppressions are interlinked as well. To give one example, when they were colonizing, there was a beautiful lecture of Black queer trans resistance, Julian Wigbertsen, who did the research on how the Dutch entered and were Christianizing, let's say, the enslaved people there. And one of the ways to inferiorize and be racist towards other cultures was like, hey, they allow homosexuality, they have this and that identity, so they are primitives. So also this queer hatred was also basically a form of anti-blackness, or a way to dehumanize others, was because they were allowing certain sexualities to be there. And also with gender oppression, if you look at the witch burns in Europe, and to see women as irrational, childlike, emotional, etc., these are things then also put to subjects on the racialized group. So there, it's I would say, if you want to completely understand racism as well, then you can also see how they are not completely separate. There's differences and everything, but there's also overlap. So I think there was a beautiful quote also by Naomi Peter that said, I don't know the quote, I have to paraphrase it, but it said something like, basically you cannot you say you're against anti-Black racism if you're also against homophobia, because they are interlocked. It's part of the identity of the cultures to be tolerant towards these things. So it's connected. She put it better. I hope it was followable, the paraphrase, but yeah.
Thank you, Max. Okay, we've run way out of time, and I've learned also that there's so much books that I still have to read, and there's so many people that inspires the team of Arales. Is there somewhere on the website like a collective, or where we can read or find all the books, documentaries, films, musicians, artists who inspired all of you?
I think the decolonial learning sessions is an effort to do that in a structured way. So each blog entry will have a few suggestions for reading, watching, very specific on one topic, so we can deep dive.
Wow. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Chihiro. Okay, so we really have come to an end of this online event. I want to thank everybody on behalf of Arales to be here with us tonight. We are already some kind of small community that is even growing and growing. Let's collaborate much more and bring great changes, I hope. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or you could subscribe for the newsletter. You can find the link to subscribe for the newsletter on Facebook and on our website. Keep in mind that our annual report will be published soon. And of course, our decolonial learning sessions that will start on May 5th. The first session will be about decolonizing universities. and it will be in Dutch. So check out our Facebook event, Decolonial Learning Sessions, or go to our website for more informations. And of course, we hope to see you all soon again physically. But for now, stay safe and take care.